YouTubers, good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you're watching this transmission. It is I, Mike Martins, with a very special, important transmission for you guys. I got a very, very important person from Toronto on the phone. The date today, before we kick off, is, let me just scroll down here. Today is the 28th of August 2018 for most of the world, and here on the Western Pacific Seaboard, it is still the 27th of August. And I have a very, very important person on the phone from Toronto that's going to give us some light. Someone inside that understands what is happening with the dynamics of the lending sphere and the dynamics of leveraged and who is leveraged and what is happening. And basically, he's a lawyer. He understands. He knows his talk. So I'm going to let him speak. He's got a lot on his mind. So Alex, how are you, my friend?
Hi, good evening, Mike, and thank you for the introduction. Good evening, YouTubers. I'm Eastern Time, Toronto. It's roughly 10:35 p.m. I'd like to thank you, my friend Mike Martins, for inviting me to be a guest on his show this evening. And I wanted to share a bit of what I'm seeing myself being in the industry. And just to be politically correct, I'm a licensed paralegal in Ontario. I own a number of businesses. One is a law practice. It's using my last name, it's Dolgonos, AG LLP, in which I have a partner who's a real estate and a family lawyer and a civil litigator. I also completed law school through the University of London, UK. I have not written my bar yet, but I do work very closely with a number of law firms. If you guys look on my website, which is www.iagentprofessional.com, this is one business that I own. And the concept of iAgent Professional is to educate the general public, to basically let them know that in today's times and the technology that we have available, it's really unnecessary to utilize the services of a real estate agent. And if Mike gives me a little bit of leeway so I don't backtrack too far, I'm currently 44 years old. But I left home at an early age, and through a good friend of mine who's a couple years older than me, happened to be a dentist at the time, I borrowed $10,000. Now, with that $10,000, if you guys are familiar with the Greater Toronto region, north of Toronto, we have a town called Richmond Hill, which today is predominantly houses range from $1 million and upwards of $4 or $5 million. It would be considered the northern part of Toronto. It's a preferable place to live these days. I purchased a townhome back then, and I was just turned straight before my 19th birthday. Now, just as an example, I purchased this home, so let's say roughly, what are we talking now, 23, 24 years ago, I purchased this home. It was brand new from the builder. The builder was Wycliffe, who's still a large-scale builder these days. I purchased this property it was $94,000. Now, back then, okay, we're going back 23 years ago, my interest was 13%. Now, the point being is that this was the price of the real estate going back 23 years ago. Even if you apply the rate of inflation at 2%, and if we go beyond that, supposedly Canada has now experienced 3%, and Stephen Polak is saying that it's exaggerated, but let's just say we apply 4%. If you were to add 4% and compound that over 25 years, you would not get to the value that I was recently in that neighborhood. There was a client that was selling a townhouse, and we were doing the closing. My office was doing the closing, so the transfer of the ownership. And it was the same unit. It was right next door, and it was over $600,000.
Whoa!
So it's folded over more than 6 times, and we all know that our salaries have not increased 6 times in the last 20 years. So the point being is that the market has really, really raced out of control in Toronto. Now, another business that I happen to own is also called iMobile Law. And if you look on my website under legal service providers, you'll see there's a company there that's called iMobile Law. Now, what iMobile Law does is it's basically a mobile notary service that's mobile. So what we do is I provide a service to any real estate law office in Ontario. So the example that I would use, if there's an office that's, let's say, located in downtown Toronto, and they have a client that's purchasing a house maybe in a city like Mississauga, which is still part of the GTA, more or less that individual would never go and drive out to Mississauga. They would find a lawyer that's closer to them.
Right.
So the way these lawyers are able to keep their clients is they send me out to see the client. I execute the paperwork. I send them back the file. I send them digital copies. They're able to do this with the law clerk We coordinate everything, and the client never has to leave their house. Now, this system came from a company that I worked for. If you guys all Google realestatelawyers.ca LLP, which is probably Canada's largest residential real estate office now. They have over 12 lawyers, and they primarily do, well, I quit in 2015. I left their office to pursue my own. But I recall in 2015, we had over 800 transactions in the month of June.
Wow.
I personally signed over 300 of them myself. So I was on the road doing 10 deals a day, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. I would sleep in the car, go to the gym, shower, and continue to my next appointment. I traveled all over Ontario. Back in 2015, the majority of these deals, so let's say I had, we'll just use a reasonable number, let's say 6 deals a day. Out of those 6, 5 would be a purchase or sale, and 1 would be a refinance. It could be because a mortgage was coming to term. It could be that somebody was borrowing some extra money. They were refinancing one mortgage. Very few second mortgages, primarily one mortgage with some extra money. That was typical back in those days. Now, since I started my company, iMobile Law, in 2016, I have over 18 real estate law offices, and these are big outfits in Ontario that I service. And what I've seen gradually happen is we went from first-tier bank mortgages, we're talking CIBC, RBC, Bank of Montreal, TD, you guys know them all, to secondary mortgages like Home Trust, Equitable Bank, to what I would call today third-tier lenders or private guys, so syndicated groups. And what I'm seeing happening from these real estate law firms, and you guys got to appreciate this, is that lawyers don't go around canvassing their clients. They don't stand on the street corner saying, hey, if you're selling your house, I can close the deal. And they don't follow agents door to door. What happens is agents typically choose a law firm or a lawyer that they're comfortable with. And once they have their deal done, so whether they buy or sell, whoever their client is, they feed it to the lawyer. So real estate lawyers, when I work with them, these guys are really good. These guys would they'd be at the Metro Convention Center, they'd be at the bridal shows, they'd be at the home shows. Their marketing they invested a lot in marketing, and they still do. You can Google them, they usually come up number 1, they're advertised everywhere. So these real estate lawyers would canvass real estate brokerages that would have 200 to 300 agents that would feed us the deals. So that's how these deals get to these lawyers' offices. And then these lawyers call my office and say, okay, Alex, I'm in Toronto, I've got a client in, even as far as Windsor or Ottawa or Sudbury. And then obviously there's an additional fee. The clients are okay with it. We go out, I see these clients, I hear their story, I see the numbers, we sign the paperwork, we bring it back. So the trend that I've seen, and especially in the last year, is the deals that I'm getting from these real estate lawyers went more from buying and selling to refinancing. And these refinancings were not first mortgages anymore. And there's the truth is in the last year, I have not seen with the exception, I think, of one CIBC first-tier bank mortgage. Everything that I'm seeing is second, and I'm seeing thirds and fourths.
Whoa. You're saying fourth lien? A fourth lien on the house and a third lien on the house?
So I can't mention any clients' names.
Well, no, I'm not mentioning names. No, I'm just saying like third and fourth liens on the house. Holy smokes!
I can tell you guys about a property. So predominant area in Toronto is Lawrence Park. So we're talking about Bathurst and Lawrence. Homes start there typically $3 to $6 million. Let's use that figure. I recently had a client, and this was at the beginning of the summer. I would say probably just past April, past what I would call the peak. And they were taking out a fourth mortgage. And this deal came through one of our private lenders that happens to use a law firm that I service with iMobile Law. So that's how I came there. We had other discussions because they had other legal issues. So they returned my office not only with the lawyer that I was working for, but they retained my office to handle their civil matters. But the point is I had told them, I said, look, I'm impartial to this particular lender that you're working with. I'm just telling you the truth. I think you guys are going to be in a terrible situation by taking this fourth position, because if you can't close out, if you can't sell the price at whatever you think you can sell at, your property is going to be taken away. And I've been seeing that more and more recently. I've been seeing people that are taking out second mortgages. Second mortgages are very typical. This is a very typical thing. That's all I've been seeing. On the occasion, I see third mortgages. And even with these second mortgages, people are really leveraging themselves by borrowing money to pay off executions that they have by credit card companies.
Right.
So they pay off these executions. We close out these credit cards. But
right.
what do these people do? Because I've been running my company, remember, since 2016. And these terms are usually a year. So now I'm coming back to the same people.
And they've reused the credit cards. And they've reused the credit cards.
Right. Not the ones that they had because we've closed them out. But they went ahead and they applied for, now I've got a $2,000 Canadian Tire and a $5,000, Walmart card, and now they've got extra credit, and they're looking at their loan situation, and they're thinking, well, yes, the price of, obviously, real estate did go up in the last year, but now it hasn't gone up enough to cover the interest that they've only paid off, plus their second mortgage, plus their new credit cards.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this happening more and more. So what I wanted to say, and I said this to Mike earlier when we had an off-the-record conversation, is I'm not a doomsday preacher, okay? I'm not out here to cause market panic. Like when they say Bitcoin's dropping, it's the end of the world, get out of cryptocurrency. No. But I am saying this, okay? I'm not upset, but I am disappointed, and I think many of you can relate that the media doesn't always portray reality, okay? We all know that. I mean, Donald Trump and fake news is widespread these days. But the reality is this, okay? The statistics that come from TREB and the statistics that come from bank, what the banks are doing is they're undermining these statistics because they themselves are regulated by fiscal, and fiscal is making it very difficult for people to borrow money.
Right. So
the stress tests keep increasing, and it's difficult to borrow money, and the banks know that. So what do the banks do? They go to my clients, let's call them, we won't use a name, but they'll go to a private lender, and they'll say, oh, this guy's been doing all these loans on all these properties and doing well, so let's give him more money to lend out.
Yeah.
So these first-year banks are actually feeding these private syndicates, but the syndicates don't need to report their data or their statistics. So the numbers that you're seeing are really offset numbers. I mean, they're not the reality. Now, I like to call myself as the soldier. I'm not the general. I'm the guy on the front lines. I'm the guy that walks into your home. I look at the numbers. I see the appraisals that were done before I come in there. I look at the the way that the property's been assessed. And some of these appraisers, especially when you're dealing with private mortgages, they obviously aim high. Like I go into these small towns where the house is like, the roof's falling apart, there's water dripping inside. No, it's probably not even in what would be deemed livable condition, but they're appraising these houses high enough to get these people a second mortgage because as long as the wheels are turning and the money's coming in, everybody's happy.
Oh, hold on. Remember that? Did you listen to the last night's show? I want to just jump in there really quick. Do you remember last night's show when I asked the guy that was a former appraiser back in Sydney, and he was a former appraiser for a couple of years, and I asked him, do they get pressure from the banks or from the lenders to try and get back a big number from an appraiser and put them in the spot?
Yes. And to answer that question honestly, and I'm not an appraiser, but I work with them.
Yes.
So first year banks have reputable appraisal companies.
Right.
In, let's say, Toronto that we work with. And those appraisals usually come back with fair market value. And what I mean by that is they're always 20% less than what the property is typically worth because they want to make sure that their big banks, who's their clients that's been feeding them a lot of deals, they want to make sure that maintain these relationships with them and they want to come back with a fair number.
Right.
But whenever it comes to these private lenders, which keep in mind are backed by the first-year banks anyways, the numbers are over-exaggerated. And they have to be because if they're not, the money's not going to come in.
And they can't do the deal. They can't close. They won't close the deal, Yeah,
and they can't close the deal, exactly. And they want to close the deal because the lender wants to charge the interest and the closing costs and the lender fees. And the borrower needs the money to cover their debt, and they don't want to lose their house.
Right.
And the interesting thing about Canada, and I can say this wholeheartedly, is this is one country in the world that people will really, really go out of their way to save their home. I mean, call it maybe not the United States, but you go into some other countries around Europe and around the world, and people fall far into debt. They just get up, they walk out of their place, I don't know, they go live with their brothers, they go live with their mothers, they go rent an apartment, whatever it is. But here, our foreclosure rate is probably one of the lowest in the world. I don't know the statistics for, let's say, Norway and Switzerland, but I can say that for the vastness of our country, it's probably the lowest in the world, up until now, that is. So people really go out of their way. They'll leverage everything to save their home, not realizing that it's short term. Mm-hmm. So what I see coming right now, and what I have seen, is even in my very own neighborhood, I've got for sale signs all over the street. Whereas a year ago when I tried to come into this neighborhood, there were bidding wars. These for sale signs are turning into lease signs. The neighbors to the left of me and the neighbors in front of me, these houses were for sale. They're now being rented because they can't get the money. And I'm just giving you an example. I live in Aurora, Ontario,
right,
which is just north of Richmond Hill. It's
right.
also a predominantly nice area with homes ranging. There is no home in my neighborhood that's listed right now, I think less than 1.1. But this is less $300,000 pre-April of this year. So in the last 6 months, I've seen people losing 10 to 15% easily on a property north of the GTA. So north has been affected more. Yes, you'll always hear about some bidding war on one property that was priced $300,000 below market value that Treb and the media and all these realtors want to make a big deal about to help sort of pump up the market to convince people that it's not over. But there's no doubt about it. If you talk to any honest realtor, there are no more bidding wars. The market is not overheated and the prices are coming down. Realistically, the market is overvalued. How much is it overvalued? It's questionable. Everybody's got a different number.
What's your number?
Opinion is that my number, I'm going to choose a realistic number. If you guys watch The Big Short, if everybody knows who Mark Cahoes is, he's talking 50, 60%. He's not my friend. I don't know him personally, but I've conversed with him really briefly over Facebook. I added him. But I'm going to take 20 to 30% as a realistic number. We've already lost, don't forget, we've definitely lost 10. As another 10 coming, undoubtedly within the next, I would say, 6 months to a year. But I really see the market really falling apart in 2019. So we're going to finish this slowest week of the year, so last week of August, pre-Labor Day. We're going to have the back to school. We're going to have, I think, an uptick in the market as well as the stock market as well. It's going to be some enthusiasm. It's going to run us till Christmas. People are going to, again, borrow everything that they can, spend as much as they can, and then they're going to sit back and they're going to see, well, what's going to move the market now? And I know that there's a lot of foreign investment coming into the country, but I want everybody to bear in mind one thing. It's not as if China has 1,000 millionaires per square kilometer. The wealth of the world is less than 0.001%. A majority of that is in Europe, portion of the United States, and obviously Asia, China. Mm-hmm. But it's still a limited number. And even though, and I would have to agree with someone like Peter Schiff and Harry Dent, is that the best way to handle this situation is let the markets be free. You don't need to intervene in them. You allow the markets to roll forward on their own. Eventually, these investors are going to start to run out. They're going to tap out of money. And even as they're investing, they're coming in here. Like the area that I live in, and I'm not being impartial or biased in any means, predominantly Asian. Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, my background is Russian. My wife's is Ukrainian. Our neighbor directly in front of us is a Russian background. But I mean, the neighbors behind, the man to the left, the people up the street, they're all Asian. It's an Asian community. But they came in here, they picked up 2-3 homes. The people that live behind me live in their home, but they rented the one next door because they couldn't sell it. So they come in with the impression that we're going to, buy it $800,000 and sell it $1.2 million. But then you run out of local buyers. Then you run out of foreign buyers. And eventually, when you have enough people standing on the ice, it collapses under its own weight. That's a good way to put it.
So okay. Middle class disappearing, of course, and then the middle class purchasing power are no longer buying from each other. So once the middle class, do you see a lot of people exiting? I know where you live. I used to go to Richmond Hill a lot, up Langstaff and Highway 7 there. I used to go up there a lot. And I noticed back when I used to go there, it was all Italian. And
I recently moved from Woodbridge because we lived at Highway 7 in Pine Valley, which was Woodbridge, and it's changing. I mean, that Italian neighborhood, this is pre my generation. They're getting older. They're selling off their properties, but you don't have their generation of children having the purchase power that their parents had, which those houses were, let's say, $30,000 20 years ago. Now they're $1.5 million. I mean, realistically, I even look at my own, I've got a son now that's just going into university for his first year. And I question, he'll come to me and ask me for things like money for gas. And his name is Adam. And I'll say, Adam, when I was 19, I was already married to your mom and I bought my first house. And you're asking me $50 for gas. Mm-hmm. Now I can appreciate that. But then what I don't understand is how is he going to save up $200,000-$300,000 for his first house? It's just not going to happen.
Remember that video I did where we were discussing and we were going over graphs about how long you had to work to buy your first a 40-hour job at, was it $85,000 a year? You'd have to save for roughly 16 to 25 years, roughly, to live in the city of Vancouver. Yes. And I think it was 11 to 15 years in Toronto. But that's for like a condo. That's like for something small. That's not for a detached home. A detached home, you're looking to work your entire life just to put a 20% down payment down, and then
even assuming that you have down payment, you're trying to tell me that you're gonna, with your living expenses, with a family, manage to save an extra $1 million on top to pay off this mortgage. I mean, you're gonna die with a mortgage, and you're gonna have to leave that mortgage to either your family or to somebody else, or it's going to have to be written off if you don't have anybody to leave it to. But the way the economy has been propped up by this, by the World Bank. So I'm not just talking about the Federal Reserve in the United States, but by propping up and purchasing all this bad debt and printing all this free money at low interest. I mean, how is it humanly possible that when I was in my 20s, my mortgage was 12%, and in my 40s, my mortgage is less than 4%? It just doesn't make sense, especially when you factor inflation. So we can't keep these artificial interest rates forever. We already know that. Paul's just said that he's going to be raising the base maybe another 25 basis points, even though he doesn't have to, because he has to, because banks are not profiting, businesses aren't profiting, corporate debt is high.
Yep.
And you got to pay back these loans somehow. You can't just write them all off entirely. So eventually this system is going to come crashing down on itself. I'm not trying to be a doomsday preacher. I've told all my clients, and I say this, that the best thing you can do right now, this year, in my opinion, and this is the opinion shared with other real estate lawyers, other real estate agents, other mortgage brokers, other financial advisors, other market analysts, is exit now and rent. I mean, why buy a home for $1.5 million when you can rent it for $2,500 a month? If the market drops 10%, so you spend $2,500 in rent, but even if you had a mortgage, it would be, let's say, $4,000 a month. Your property tax is $1,000 a month.
Yep.
You've got to maintain everything, and you'll never save $200,000. I'm not saying make. I'm saying save $200,000 in 1 year. So it makes sense to rent.
Right.
Worst case scenario, you save your $150,000.
Exactly. And and then if you're down, if you're down 10 points from that 1.5 million, you're down 150 large.
Yes, but we've already lost that 10 points. We're already past 10 points. Like, the neighbor was listed, where we moved in, the neighbor's home, which was just rented out, so it's just adjacent to if you're facing the house, to my right. So this house was listed at 1.42 in April of this year. They eventually lowered the price to 1.12, so 300,000 off, and they couldn't sell it, and now they're renting. Now, keeping in mind, this is a brand new neighborhood. So this is a brand new build. You've got a family of 6 people, so it's a husband and wife with 4 kids. What is that house going to look like after their 1-year lease? These people assume that the price that house fetched brand new is the same price that it's going to fetch when all the hardwood floors are scratched up and the kitchen cabinets are worn out and the appliances are scratched. No, so you got to factor that in as well. And you're also assuming that you're not going to have bad tenants. I go to the landlord. I was just at the landlord-tenant board just last weekend, and I go there very often for many clients. So, as obviously as people are exiting and those that go to rent, it props up the rental market. But to a certain point, at some point, people are going to say in Toronto, it's $1,800 for a 1-bedroom condo. I mean, who can afford that? You're talking about a millennial that works a $40,000, $50,000 a year job, and 70% of his income after tax dollars going just to rent. I mean,
overhead.
That's not sustainable. So once all these, what's got to happen is enough. The gas prices go up a little bit, the cost of food goes up a little bit, everything, the resources go up, electricity, property tax, and people just start getting tapped out, and that will reverse the economy.
Yes.
Inflation will turn into deflation.
That's correct.
And that's when, and obviously, like Mike is saying, the rich obviously can go and buy all these poor positions that people are in, and they'll continue to get richer. The middle class get wiped out, and then they become part of the poor class.
But the poor is used to being poor, so there's no difference for them, right?
No difference for them. And then you become poor, and then you spend the next, call it the next decade, 10 years, making yourself middle class again. So, That's been my experience. This is not just an opinion. This is what I'm seeing, and especially in this last 3 weeks of August. Again, Mike and I were having an off-the-record conversation. I've only had, I think, one or two, and these were refinances at the beginning of August. I'm not looking at my calendar, but I can recall it was one or two or three at the most, as opposed to 2 or 3 a day.
Yeah.
So the last 3 weeks have been very, very slow, and I know August is a slow month, but I've been hearing, if you look on my website under the financial services, all the private lenders and these law offices that I work with, I've been hearing it's been slow for a lot of people. So I don't know if this is the tipping scale. It could be. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but my opinion is now's the time to exit. This is your final opportunity to be able to reasonably exit. I mean, you can always exit. Everything sells. I mean, some realtor asks me, well, can I sell my house next year? I'm like, yeah, but not for $1 million, for $800,000. And in 2 years, if the market drops 30%, sure, you can sell it for $600,000-$700,000. Everything sells. It just depends on what somebody's willing to pay for it. So I've seen a lot of people. So my real estate investors, I've got a group of people that are part of the RAIN network, and they always use our services because they're busy. They're real estate investors. They like the service where we come to their house, we provide the closing services for them. What I'm seeing is more or less of them, they're also tapped out. So they're holding on to the properties that they have. They're duplexes, triplexes. They're collecting rent. The rent is reasonable. They're in a position where, sure, the market drops 20-30%. As long as they don't need to exit, they got the guys paying rent, they're okay. But they don't have any new money. They're all calling me and asking, hey, Alex, do you got any guys with any money? You got any foreign investors? You got any guys that own companies, in your corporate deals that don't know what to do with their money, because we can use them to buy more properties. So there's still going to be motion. People are always going to be buying and selling. I mean, if the market drops, people are going to have to get out. I don't know if there's repossessions by the bank, foreclosures, whatever there'll be sales, and there'll be people in the money with market. But we're talking about that middle class. So now is not a good time to buy. That I can say confidently.
Okay, Alex, I want to ask you first a personal question. Did you end up buying that stock that I told you to buy? 3 months?
I did not buy the stock that you told me to buy, because around that time is when I was getting into purchasing a property.
Okay, because
it did well.
Yes,
but you were right on the nose on it. I know that.
Okay. Just asking if you want, because I've bought and sold that position probably 500 times in the last year.
That's why you're doing better than me then, my friend.
Well, I'm just flipping it, leaving it, and then buying it back and flipping it, leaving it, because it drops 50% every other 2 days, you know what I'm saying? So, and it goes up 50% every 2 days. So, anyways, okay, so Alex, I want to ask you, how many people are renting at a negative position right now, in your opinion?
When you say renting, are you talking about a real estate investor that's renting his property?
Yes. Because you said that the houses was for sale, then they dropped the price, they didn't sell, and now they're just leasing them out. How many people are renting out at a negative position?
So if we're talking about the foreign investor, they're not in a negative position, because bearing in mind, these guys come in and they stood in line and they bought these houses for $800,000 cash, mortgage free.
Right.
So they're not renting it in negative position. And you got to remember that this majority of this wave of foreign investment, they're not negative. Where they will be negative, is after the rental phase, after their rental cycle, their phase cycle, so call it a year or two. Most people sign a 1 or 2 year lease, especially in a home with a family. What's going to happen is, don't forget, the house deteriorates. It needs maintenance. And now the market for the middle class has dropped. And that's when they're going to be in a negative. In terms of renting at a negative, those numbers, I don't have an exact number, but they're pretty low. Most of the people, if we call them the investor, they've purchased, they've done their math, their experience, they've divided the property up to enough rooms or whatever, so they're not negative. I've got a couple of cases that are in litigation in small claims court and the landlord-tenant board where people haven't paid rent. So whenever you move out of the, let's say, a central, highly populated area. So if you're moving to the outskirts of town, bearing in mind what kind of jobs do people have out there, you're moving more into service related. You're talking about people that are holding jobs in restaurants, possibly Walmarts, gas stations. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but you got to look at the quality of the tenant and what their income is. So, obviously in the GTA, you're not going to experience that as much because you've got people that are holding, jobs as engineers and teachers and firefighters and police officers, nurses, doctors, that whole thing. Once you get into the outskirts, when you get into these smaller towns, and Mike would be familiar, like we talk about Oshawa, talk about Ajax,
yep.
Brockville. Once you get out there, you've got people in negative territory out there. So you definitely have people in negative territory because you got people that are, bad tenancy positions.
Yes.
That can't handle the increase in rent. So that's happening in these smaller towns, and eventually it'll trickle down. But it's not a common issue, because if it were, then it would be all over the newspaper. Every real estate agent would caution you about it. So it's not happening. I think on the flip side, though, where are people in poor negative rent positions? I think the general middle class. I think even the people that are renting, are paying prosperous amounts of dollars to rent. The average rent, I think this was a Trev statistic. You can Google it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the average cost to rent a one-bedroom apartment in the city of Toronto, so we're talking about in the downtown core, is $1,800 a month for 600 square feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the average income is $50,000. After tax dollars, you're talking about $2,500 a month. So how are you surviving if your rent is $1,800? And you're just talking about rent. You're not even added, and even in a condo, you have to pay for at least electricity.
Yeah.
So if you're not paying for your parking space and your internet that's connected or whatever else you have, but how are people maintaining it? They're not. So they're saying, okay, well, I'll take a line of credit, or I'll borrow some money. I'll have a roommate, and the roommate leaves. So I think people are generally over leveraged in their living expenses. Their leased cars and everything else that they're holding on to.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that eventually, it's a snake that's going to end up. It's grown so big that it's now turning around and starting to bite at its own tail. And it's going to have to start to eat itself up eventually. And we all know that market cycle, it's been said 1,000 times that it's been 10 years, it's been prolonged. It doesn't matter how high you build a building. Even the CN Tower since, 1974, I think it was put up. Eventually, that building's got to come down. Yeah. Everything's going to have to come down. What level is it going to come? Where is the bottom? I see the bottom 20-30%. I've heard very pessimistic numbers. I'll give you guys an example, though. My father lives, if you guys know, Sunny Isles, Miami, one of the most predominantly expensive areas in all of Florida.
Yep.
In 2006, he bought a penthouse in the Trump Plaza, for $223,000.
Mm-hmm.
The asking price at the time was around $700,000-800,000.
Right.
Okay. He ended up buying it from the bank and went into foreclosure. He bought 2 or 3 units. But the point is he resold that unit in 2015 for $2.3 million.
Yep.
Those units today are sitting around that price. He's now purchased a $6 million unit in the Aquafina building on Sunny Isles, and I told my dad, it's been for sale for a year. You ain't getting out anywhere near that kind of money. It's okay. He's a really well-to-do guy. Doesn't benefit me anywhere financially, but if he takes $1 million lost there, it's fine. It's not going to change his life at all. Nothing's going to change. He's still going to drive his Rolls Royce. So the point is that that's an example of that the market dropped 80%. And, there's guys out there saying it's going to drop 60, 70%. I don't think that our infrastructure, our socioeconomic infrastructure is set up to take that kind of a loss here. I don't think that the general middle class would be able to afford that kind of a hit. So no. I truly believe that if it came down to that, there would definitely be intervention from the government.
Okay, Alex, I wanted to say something. This is actually going to tie into what you're saying. Okay. Do you remember that article I was reading? I don't know if you remember this, but it was from Trends in the Housing Market from last Wednesday, and I was discussing about Portland, Oregon, okay? Now, Portland, Oregon pricing is going nuts, south of Washington State and north of California. So the pricing in those states have gone ludicrous because people from California and Washington are moving to Oregon where it's cheaper. Now, they're tipping. Okay, listen to me, Alex. They're tipping at $401,000 for a detached 3-bedroom home. They're tipping at $401,000 with the average income, dual income, of $81,000. They can't afford it. So they're tipping at $81,000. So the average income is not $81,000 in most of the cities in Canada. And because I'll tell you why. Because Portland is more of a work-free state, so you pay less you pay less taxes on your labor. Okay?
Right.
So you actually make more because you spend less to live, right? So, in the reality of it, it's tipping at 401,000. And they're cutting it off early. You see what I'm saying? They're cutting the snake. The snake's head is being cut off at a young age, instead of fueling it and causing all these bullcrap fueled bubbles like Seattle did and California did, and now but Portland's saying no way. Housing minister is going in there. They had a meeting this week, and they're cutting. It's cut at 401,000, and now it's starting to tip. It looks like Portland, Oregon housing is going to see the bottom fall out, and it's going to go back to 210,000 average per home. And the person making 81 large can't afford to service a $400,000 debt.
Yes, and that's an ideal example, and that same example can be applied not just in Canada. Australia is completely off the charts, but we can apply that all over the UK, all over Europe. Places like Italy, where their entire economy is on the verge of collapse. Mm-hmm. So that model can be applied everywhere, and I think like I said, the reason we're here is because of government intervention. That's right. I've said this before, the best way to let the markets, if I can use the terminology, to breathe is to let them be free and not to intervene.
Okay.
Now in Portland, they had to intervene.
In Portland they intervened. Okay, let me say something. But how did we let Vancouver go so far, in Toronto and other cities, and Montreal is feeling this effect right now? How did they let it go so far beyond reach? Where in Oregon State, they're like, oh, we're losing everyone's moving east to Nevada. We can't keep anybody here paying taxes. What are we gonna do? Well, how come they basically cut the snake's head off right there and then? And they raised interest rates a few times. The United States created a really good buffer zone by raising interest rates, 6 times already since Trump's been in office? That interest rates that have risen, the United States is 8 months or a year ahead of us in raising rates. So right now in the United States, they've created a buffer zone. So if they do get into a recession or a housing tumble or a credit crunch, they've already created this buffer zone by raising rates. An aggregate, right? But Canada hasn't. They've done it like a year after they started raising rates, and the aggregate is too far off. You know what I'm saying, Alex?
Yeah, too little, too late. But I think the easiest way to explain that is don't forget Canada's position on our entire real estate market. Just remember, if we go back a year ago, 2 years ago, and what Stephen Bolts would say on the news, and Prime Minister Trudeau, is that our banking systems we've got all sorts of stops in place, that what happened in America could never happen in Canada. So one is that we're being naive about the reality. But I think that, politically speaking, and I'm not going to call out any names, and of course this is just something that I think this is a very generalized statement, but there's a lot of greedy hands that are dipping into pockets honestly, And that's another problem that we have. We have a lot of these builders that have come in. We've got, especially in Ontario, we've got tons of overbuilding. There's clearly been some sort of favoritism. There's payouts to political campaigns and political agendas. And again, it's like the same theory that we have with the lender, that as long as there's development, as long as there's lending, as long as they're boring, as long as there's people coming in, especially with what our immigration minister is doing, with our open border policy with Trudeau and letting people in, It's all fine and dandy. It's all roses. Nothing can possibly go wrong. We got people coming in. What we're not telling the truth is the majority of the people are not foreign investors. The majority of the people are people that are coming in and hitting our social, our social system for assistance. So, these numbers will play out as time will progress. And I think that I think the best way to analyze let's call it real estate reality 101, if I can paraphrase it that way, is we just have to talk to the end user. I assure you, Mike, that if you and I grab a microphone and we just hit a few neighborhoods, whether it be where you live or where I live, and we ask people, did they feel financial pressure? Did they feel that they're leveraged? I would think that 8 out of 10 people, 7 out of 10 people, or the majority are going to say yes. Not just in real estate, in everything.
Yeah.
In inflation in general. And that whole system, I've got a client, they run The company, you guys can look them up. I was just in Washington D.C. for them. It's called USA Really. Their motto is "Wake Up America," and they broadcast on like advertisements, like he's standing at a bus shelter where it says, "Therapy helped me, and it can help you too." I mean, people are feeling the pressure, not just financially, but socially, psychologically. It's affecting all of us.
It's a huge psychological. Huge psychological.
And you guys know how the markets work. If I went on TV and I was Stephen Poltz and I said, "That's it, next month I'm raising interest rate 5%," everybody would try to exit. And everybody would try to run for the door. If I was a guy that was reporting on stock markets and I was on, our favorite channel, what is it, CNN or Fox News, and I went in and said, "Well, the markets look like they're tanking," everybody would try to wreck it. So psychology plays a big part. But the difference is there's two types. There's the psychology, which things that are said to you, and then there's the psychology of the things that are real to you, the things that surround you.
That's right.
And those play different strings, but they weigh very heavily on us. So I think that if we were just to take a general consensus, and I'm being very general about this, I think we all agree that we're in a bubble. We're in an economic bubble. We're in a real estate bubble. We're in a very leveraged bubble, and we all are, including myself. And I mean, I do. I would say that I'm not I'm definitely not financially, independent. I have to wake up and go to work like everyone else. I'm far off from being a millionaire, but I could say that I'm above the medium, and even I struggle. Now, if I have to struggle in my career with my 3 companies, plus my wife has a business, I have to question myself, how does everybody else doing it? A lot of people, especially out in the Brampton area, you've got these houses that are 6,000-7,000 square feet. There's 2 or 3 tractor trailers parked outside. You've got 3-4 families living. I remember we lived in Newmarket. I asked my neighbor, really nice guy. He had like a convertible Mustang and a Mercedes and a minivan and an SUV. And his name is Gap. And I would say to him, "Gap, just curious, you got these tigers in your front yard. We have the same size house." It was what's it called? An Acorn-built 5-bedroom house in Newmarket that I bought with my ex-wife. It was 10 years ago, $312,000. Today it's close to $1 million. And I said to him, "What do you do for a living?" And he said, "Oh, I work at a factory." And I thought, again, an engineer. And I'm like, "Oh, so what do you do like an engineer?" He'd be like, "No, I package boxes. I'm a packager." And I'm like, "And you can afford all this?" And he goes, "Well, my parents live with me, and my wife's parents live with us, and our grandparents live here." And I'm like, "All 12 of you?" And he goes, "Yeah." So, you've got a lot of that going on too. You've got a lot of families that are buying up these big houses, and they're all living in them together. But that's not the average. That is not the average. So there's a lot of numbers that are misreported. There's a lot of statistics, like I said, from the private lenders that are not being reported. These private lenders, where do the majority of private people get their money from? I mean, they go to the bank like you and I do, except they've got really good credit, they've got really good assets, so they can borrow a lot more. And now they become a syndicate. They get a couple of friends together, but it's still the bank's money, except it's not being reported. So the real numbers out there, I would say that the majority of mortgages are moving to private equity. And the private equity numbers will never be reported. And then you've got companies like myself, like iAgent Pro, and you've got, ComFree and Private Exchange and Property Ladder. And you've got all these companies that are flipping real estate privately. And you've got some experienced real estate investors that don't use agents, and those numbers aren't being reported. And nobody knows, hey, I'm asking 1.2 million. Would you take $1 million cash? Sure, let's do it. There's no agent. Those numbers aren't reported. So there's a lot of things that are not reported. So we don't have all the numbers, we don't have all the facts, but what we do have is we can all generalize that we're in a bubble.
Yes.
And every bubble eventually bursts.
Well, that's correct. But the thing is, the difference is, and what I've been preaching on my channel for, the last about 5, 6, 7 years, is that this isn't a normal trend in the housing market, right? I usually follow stocks. I follow stocks, features markets. I have mock portfolios to follow stocks through the year. Dividends, ETFs. I do all that, and that's what I was into in my late teens until now, and I still do that. Spot gold, silver, all that stuff, oil, crude, all that stuff. Now, I got a huge interest in the housing market when I moved from Miami to Vancouver 13 years ago, and the average house was $600,000, and that same house in Miami was $190,000. And I just couldn't believe it. And And that same house now is like $2.4 million. It's just crazy, you know. That's incredible yield return on. That's a huge yield on some of those investments. But the average, I'm seeing what it's doing to the Canadian proper, the actual Canadian that's born and raised, worked here all his life. He's getting bought out of his own city, you know. It's not that Alex, it's not that I didn't want to spend $2 million and buy a house. I just didn't want to spend $2 million and buy a house that's realistically worth $400,000. And that's why I left. That's the right way of putting it. Yeah, and that's why I left Vancouver, and now I live in a small town called Merritt. My house is enormous. It's over 5,000 square feet. It's got an enormous backyard. I got 7 bathrooms in it. I have everything I need, all the space I need. I don't have to upgrade. I don't have to, you know what I mean, right? I don't have to upgrade to a bigger house. I'm already 40. I did everything late because of this stupid housing market. I would have bought 10, 15 years ago when I moved to Vancouver 13 years ago, but I just didn't want to spend that much money on a house, and I just potato, it's just not worth it in the end, you know? You're not getting bang for your buck, you know? So that's why I did my move, and then I did that, but it's not just me. My entire block here, 7 out of the 13 people that live here are from Vancouver. So that's what's happening, and it's a lot of intermigration. I want to ask you something, Alex. Are you seeing a lot of people leaving the big cities, younger millennials, and people, you know, just having trouble making ends meet? Because it is very expensive to live there. Are you
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. I mean, even working. So my last couple of years at Real Estate Lawyers, because these guys spend over $50,000 every month in marketing. They started to spend a lot of money in market analysis to see where the trends were heading. Where are these deals closing? Where are we going to send these mobile signing units? Where are we going to open up our satellite offices? So if you go to their website, they have 35 satellite offices. And the trend is definitely moving north. I mean, and I'm just, you know, I came to this country in 1979. Now, Mike, if you're familiar with Toronto, if you think of Steeles, which runs east to west, Steeles Avenue, and Yonge Street, which is the longest street in the world that runs north to south, everything north of Steeles, when I came to Canada, we lived right at the corner of Yonge and Steeles. There's a mall there, which is called Centrepoint Mall. Yep. It's the same mall, but it be called Town and Country because it was on the edge of the town, and on the other side, it was all gravel. It was country. Mm-hmm. Today, it's sprouted enormously. I mean, everything is moving north because it's the only affordable place left. And as it's moving north, it's moving north, but it's not only exponentially that it's growing north, but the prices are growing as well. So then here's an example. Like I said, 10 years ago, I went to the builder. I bought a 5-bedroom, call it 3,000 square foot custom, well, not a custom, but Acorn seems to, they're almost like we would say as close to custom buying from a large scale builder. Acorn, Wycliffe, these guys build beautiful homes. So we bought this was our 4th home, my ex-wife and I. This is 3,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms. And I went to the builder and I wanted the skylight windows on the thing. I wanted the oak staircases, the white, you know, mirage flooring, the staircases to match, the most expensive kitchen cabinets, marble countertop. I mean, every possible upgrade I got that you could possibly get, that house came out to $352,000. Now, again, if I imply a 3% inflationary rate, and I allow that rate, you know, I take the rate and I add to it, so exponentially, I would probably arrive at around 500,000. I think I did the math. It was 400 and something thousand dollars.
You're right.
Years later.
Yeah.
Or $500,000. But the house was appraised, and I know this from obviously communicating with my family, my ex-wife, is that she had the house appraised at $980,000. And don't forget, that was a bank appraisal, first-tier bank that likes to come in at least 20% lower to be safe. So, and I know that the houses there are close to $1 million on that crescent. Now, when I went to buy that house with her, my down payment was $50,000. If I had to go buy that house today, I'd need at least $500,000. I don't have $500,000 in cash to put down. Mm-hmm. My kids sure as hell won't. So the bottom line is yes, the prices they're completely out of control. And we're talking about Newmarket. When somebody tells me that there's $1 million home in Newmarket, if I went back 10 years ago, I'd say $1 million in Newmarket. Man, you must have 5 swimming pools, 10 tennis courts, and a roller coaster in your backyard. Mm-hmm. I remember when we came to Canada. The year was 1980. My dad just bought a 1980 Trans Am TA. Yeah. And he had a very close friend. He recently passed. It was about 5-6 years ago. I was at the hospital. great man. His name was Vila. He was Italian. And my dad, with this thick Russian accent, said to me one day, it was like, whatever I was at the time, 7, 8 years old, my dad's like, we're going to Vila's house. And he says to me, it's a mansion. It's $1 million. And I remember this was in the city of Toronto. The guy had an indoor, outdoor pool, sauna, tennis court, 10,000 square feet was $1 million in Toronto. When I was telling my dad that can I borrow some money, Dad, because you're keeping it at the bank at maybe 1%, I'll pay you 4%. Can I borrow some down payment money from you? He's like, absolutely not. And I said to him, but Dad, the house is over $1 million. Like, what do you need a house for $1 million for? I said, what are you talking about? It's like 2,000 square feet. What do you think I'm buying? And this is a guy that himself lives in it's got a couple of properties, but he just assumed that in the United States, in Miami, they're $6 million, but in Toronto, they're still, $50,000.
Yeah.
And the point being is that, everything's raced out of control. Now, mind you, we could apply that to many things. I mean, what did a Mercedes-Benz cost 20 years ago? You probably buy an S-Class for, $30,000, $40,000. Now you're over $100,000. But the difference is you're talking about a $100,000 car or a $1.5 million home. That's a far stretch. So yes, can we come up with $100,000? Yeah, we can somehow. We'll finance it, we'll lease it, we'll save it, we'll buy it. But are we going to save up $1 million with all of our going on expenses? Probably not. So that's pretty much my take. Again, I'm not trying to be a doomsday preacher. In general, I'm a very positive person. I believe that if Mike, look, what you did, I would have done. But you got to appreciate one thing. Not everybody's an entrepreneur like you. I'd like to be able to say that, sure, all these people that work at IBM and at Microsoft and at Cisco and at KPMG can just, drive up north 5 hours every day and buy a piece of property for 50% less in Toronto. But they can't because they can't leave their jobs.
Right.
And just like myself, I mean, if I had a choice, sure, I'd go live in Barrie, because in Barrie, I can get the same property that I have now, still at 50% off. But all my clients are in Toronto. I already have to spend 1 or 2 hours driving around just to get to them. I can't imagine spending 2, 3 in traffic. So we don't all have that, that opportunity that you had where, you go to another town, you open up a business, and realistically, even if the business takes in even a little bit less or even 50% less, because your expenses are so much less, you actually live much better.
You do.
So
I took a huge cut in pay. I sold the business downtown. I sold my downtown business in Vancouver. I already bought my house. My house was already paid for free and clear before I sold the business, right? So, yeah, I already saved money for the house. I already had the down payment to put in down Vancouver. I was going to put down a lot of cake. Like, I was going to put down 80% in Vancouver, but you know what? 70%. That's what I was going to do. But you know what, Alex? I didn't feel right with me. I'm so happy I left the city. I'm so happy I left the bad drivers, the angry people, everybody. Okay, can I ask you a question? Is everybody walking around in Toronto like very upset, soulless? Because when I just
recently, if you sit in traffic and you look at the looks on people's faces in their cars, they look like and I'm sorry to say this, and I know I'm speaking out loud publicly, but they look like they're on the verge of committing suicide. I mean, when I drive my car, it's like a war zone out there. It's as if somebody wants to run me off the road or crash into me, because God forbid if the speed limit's 60 and I'm not going 80, or I'm on the highway and it's 100 and I'm not going 125, they're going to ride right into my bumper.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been driving for a long time, and I can be a pretty aggressive driver, but and my wife is the most calmest person in the world, and even she'll tell me what she's seen change in the last 10 years. It's not just, I'm glad you brought up the point, because it's not just the economy. I mean, the sense of just what you're sensing from people, the animosity. You could be standing in a Tim Hortons, and there could be somebody with their kids and some guy standing behind them in front of them, and they're trying to decide what topping they want on their sandwich, and the guy just takes a fit and starts whipping stuff around and walks out of there and say, I can't take it anymore, because he couldn't handle that extra 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And like I said, my friend with this USA Really company, which says, you stand beside an advertising a bus shelter in the United States on like some main street in New York, and it says therapy helped me, because that pressure is coming down into our psyche.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know my neighbors, but I don't really know my neighbors. If I go back to my first house, my neighbors and I were friends. They'd come cut my grass. I mean,
Yes.
the last place that I lived with when I met my current wife, and we bought our first home, and it was in Maple, so not, again, in Vaughan, between Richmond Hill and Aurora and Woodbridge. We bought a townhome, and, my neighbor, we shared a driveway because we were together, so our drives were together. He had a snowblower. It was one of those winters, like 5 winters ago, it snowed like crazy. There must have been, like, I don't know, 30 inches of snow. This guy takes out a snowblower, and he leaves a perfect line. I was at work. I was working at Real Estate Lawyers 24/7. And I remember driving up to the driveway at like 10 o'clock at night, and my poor wife, was shoveling the snow. And this guy left a perfect line, like right on the edge of what considered half of the driveway. It would have literally taken him 2 seconds to plow that. But there is no, I don't know, people are not as friendly. People are angry. People are, people are jealous. People are envious. I don't know. There's a lot of things going on, but I understand these people. Mm-hmm. I do understand. I understand that they're in a rush. They're sitting in traffic. They got to get home to watch their favorite TV show before they got to get back in the car tomorrow. And all of that just to get by.
Yeah.
Just to get by.
Yep. People sitting in traffic for endless hours. People commuting. These crazy power commuters. People commuting. Did you see the story about the guy that commutes 4 hours a day to work?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah, from wherever he was to San Francisco, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I was talking to a couple of tech companies right now. One tech company out in King County, Seattle area, and he goes. He was telling me that if he was to open something like what he does in Merritt, people from Vancouver will come to us in Merritt and live here because people go to the jobs. And that's what a lot of these companies are forgetting, that people go to the jobs. So if something big opened, let's say somewhere cheap in Cambridge, Ontario. Let's say this big Microsoft company opens in Cambridge, Ontario. Don't you think a lot of people will leave Toronto and relocate to Cambridge before the prices go crazy?
Absolutely, and you would actually, not only that, you would actually get the exact client. You would actually get a filter of the exact kind of people that you're looking for.
Exactly.
Right. You definitely get all these people that have a graduate degree in computer science and all these technically, the people that have got that technical expertise and that technical background. They'd flock out there, just like what happened with Waterloo and RIM.
Yeah.
I mean, as RIM died down, a lot of people had to migrate out of Waterloo and try to come to Toronto and not be able to afford the rent, but they had no choice. I mean, they were depending on that job. They were depending on that career. Okay. So, yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, like I said, I follow you, socially on Facebook too. I see your posts. I've seen pictures of your home. I see that you're always smiling. You're always happy. I've heard your verbatim in your preaching, and I totally agree with you. But you have to consider yourself fortunate, and it's a blessing because not everybody's in that position to be able to get up. I've got a friend. He just moved from Edmonton. Now, I shouldn't say he's just moved. He's been here for a year. He's got 2 factories. One is a plant in Mississauga. They manufacture, so he's not a retailer. They manufacture windows that they sell to the installers who retail them.
Okay.
And then he's got a retail operation in Edmonton. So they manufacture, sell to their retail place in Edmonton, and they do sales from there. So his wife was living in Edmonton last year while he came here and opened up a plant with this Toronto partner. Mm-hmm. And he was traveling back and forth like a couple of times a month because he's got 3 kids and a very young one. And, the business there. And they just sold their house, which is roughly the same size of the house that they're renting in North York. They're paying $3,500 a month rent. Ooh. But they sold their house there for $500,000. And his biggest complaint, as he said to me, he goes, even though he lives in his own ethnic community, close to his biological mother, her mom happens to live in Toronto, but she's north. She's in Schaumburg. Mm-hmm. But, he says to me, I can't handle the traffic. He goes, I've never known traffic in Edmonton. He says, the people here are like, he goes, everywhere you go, you get explicit attitude. People, they give you the dirtiest looks. Nobody's polite. And he says, I'm not happy. He says, life is not better here. I work much harder. I don't own the house because it's close to $2 million because he's in the city of Vaughan. He's in Thornhill. Mm-hmm. And I told him, don't even think about buying this house. Rent it. The people had it for sale for a year. They couldn't sell it. They agreed to rent it only because he paid 6 months rent in advance.
Ooh.
6 months, yeah. So do six at $3,500. Not everybody's able to do that, right? Not everybody can walk in and do that. But he's got a successful business. But he said to me, "I'm working 24/7, and though this business is making some money here, all the money makes goes to expenses." And he says he's not happy about anything. He said, "Yeah, okay, it's colder there a couple of months out of the year, but he says there's the advantage of having peace and property in a bigger house in the middle of a forest, and they want to go back, but his wife has got her family here, and she doesn't want to go back. So I don't know if they'll find their peace here eventually. They were originally from Toronto, but they moved out there. He got quite successful in the business there. But then his wife missed living out here. But now that he's been back a year, he said that if it wasn't for her, he would have never moved back to Toronto." So I agree with, the concept of urbanization about, it's happening in Toronto. We've got, there's a Honda plant just on the 404 highway, which is literally 5 minutes from where I live. You've got, there's a lot of large State Farms, a lot of large buildings going up in Richmond Hill and Aurora, like State Farm. But it's nowhere near the downtown core. So it's slowly happening. But again, it's not going to happen fast enough. And even though that they've expanded their infrastructure with the new subway system, which is not entirely complete yet, they're still overbuilt. They've got overbuilding on all these lines, on the subway lines. You've got condos and towers going up everywhere. You've got housing developments, townhouses, new home builds, semis. Like, there's also a lot of overbuilding. So on top of the current real estate market, you gotta factor in what's being built. And don't forget, these are phases like 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, I'm in phase 4 right now, which was 7 years in development. Whoa. So you've got a lot of development that bought a lot of properties, that put in a lot of sewage systems that are still going to be built in the next decade. And that isn't being factored in too. So that's going to affect prices as well as these developments start becoming available. And the market starts slowing down, but they can't stop the development. They've already purchased the land. They've committed to building. They've collected deposits. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be that can't be necessarily calculated.
I have a question because you're in law, and I got a really good question. I felt bad for a lot of people that basically got their deposits back. Did you hear about that? That was in the news. Some condos, a couple of people bought condos 2 years ago. The price went up higher. So instead of them building the project, they just gave people back.
They just returned their deposit. Yeah, they returned their deposit.
That's horrible because if they walked away from the deal and negated the deal, they'll sue them.
Yeah, and I'm sure that I never looked at any of those APSs, those agreements of purchase and sales, but I'm certain that the builder, whoever that builder was, and I remember seeing that in a newspaper, and it was on a number of occasions. It wasn't just once, but they have some very sophisticated terminology, some very sophisticated documentation that protects them in that event too. That they're giving first right to forfeit, or I'm sure that there was something written in there legally that allowed them to state that position. So I can't speak to it directly because I haven't seen it, but it's unfortunate. It didn't. It happened. It didn't happen as much as it could happen. But, and again, that was a very short-lived cycle. Right now, I don't think there's one builder anywhere in Toronto that's going to turn around and say, "Here's your deposit back because our property is now worth $100,000 more than it was 2 years ago." I think now they're very... So if you remember in the paper, it's not Maple. I don't want to miscall it. I'm not sitting in front of my laptop, but is it not Countrywide? I can't remember. It's a very big builder.
Mattamy
Homes. So what happened with Mattamy Homes? They knew that they were so concerned that the market was going to do this reverse that I had clients calling our office and saying, "They forced me to close. I don't even have a kitchen. What do I do?" And I said, legally, you just need to have running water to the unit. So you don't even need to have a toilet seat in there. They're allowed to close on you. And they were forced to close. I had friends that bought one of those properties, and they sent me pictures. These were friends. This was out in Oakville, actually. And they sent me pictures where there was, in their kitchen, they didn't even have the drywall installed above their kitchen.
Oh,
they would eat it.
That was along Spears Road, right? Spears and 3rd Line? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that was. Yeah. Yeah, I know exactly where that was. So okay, what about walkaways? I want to ask you about walkaways. How many people are walking away from down payments or deposits?
You know what? I can tell you that when I was working at Real Estate Lawyers, I was doing very well because I was so busy with the mobile signings. A year later, my wife and I ventured. We ended up buying a custom-built home in Woodbridge. But we were looking at Kleinburg because back there you had homes that were, 6, 7, 8,000 square feet that were at that time around, they were starting at 1.6 to, $2 million if you went to something like with an elevator and 10,000 square feet. And and I'm saying like even this year, when was I in Kleinburg? It was at the beginning of this year. There were a couple of deals where people were walking away because they bought from the builder, or not from the builder, they bought privately, properties for like 2.6, 2.8 because the prices went up substantially as well in that area. And then just literally 6, 7 months later, they saw that the neighbors' homes were relisting for 2.2. And they would walk away from $50,000 deposits. I would tell them, you're going to lose $50,000. That's okay. I'd rather lose 50 than 400,000. So walkaways are starting to happen on luxury properties, because luxury properties, just like in Vancouver, you're taking 10. Like I said, unquestionably, we've had a 10% hit in the last 6 months all over the GTA. We're not talking about just suburban north. We're talking about downtown Toronto. So this friend of mine who owns the manufacturing company, his wife's parents just sold a house in King City. They originally listed it in April for 4.8, custom built. They spent 2 years building it. It was an investment. Her husband's a builder. They listed it at 4.8. I said to them, it's way too high. They just closed it unconditionally. A guy bought the house. He sold the property in Lawrence Park area for $3.522. That's $1.3 million less than the original asking price, $6 million, 6 months ago. So my point is luxury properties, when you're losing 10, 15 points, and especially north, we're seeing 15% all over. 15 points on $3-4 million is huge money. People are walking away from luxury properties. People are walking away from a $600,000, $700,000 townhouse, which I know could translate into a big piece of real estate where you live. People are not walking away because can't buy much here for $600,000. You're talking about 600 square feet condo. So they're not walking away, because if they walk away, they've got nothing to walk into.
That's right.
But luxury properties, it's happening. And that's another thing that's not being reported. Does Treb go around and reporting how many people walk away from a deal?
No, of course they don't. No, of course they don't. Of course they don't. Luxury market usually is the first to go. When I was in Miami in 2006, 7-ish, tail end of 2007, I remember how the luxury property market took a huge hit, and then then there was a condo crash, and then after the condo crash, all the homes started to go detached. Freehold homes started to fall right after. So it was like a domino effect in Miami. It started with the high-end stuff, dropped like 50 points, and then people with their condos that paid more for those, what the luxury homes are valued at 50-point deduction, are saying, wait, what am I paying this for that? You know what I'm saying? And then boom, you just start seeing lock boxes on doors, posters on doors, huge posters saying, sheriff, blah, blah, blah. Then people can't go onto the property. Oh my God, it was an absolute nightmare. And same thing that's happening in Sydney right now. Same thing that's happening in Auckland. It's all and London, right now, London, UK, it's all the high-end properties are the ones that are taking the big hits right now.
Yeah, and so I've seen like a lot of reports on like, very prestigious streets in New York and prestigious condominiums that were listed at 10 million. Are now dropping like 50 points to 5 million. And again, remember, somebody that can afford a $10 million condo, though it's an enormous hit, when they lose that kind of money for the original owner of that property, he'll be fine. He'll take his couple of $1 million hits and move on. But it's the guys that follow that domino effect that can't afford it. So once that premium condo falls, and then the other condos go from, we'll call it, like in Toronto. I gotta say this. After our Woodbridge property, we rented for a short time. So we'll talk premium Richmond Hill, Yonge and Highway 7. Right between Highway 407 and Highway 7, there was 2 condominium towers. One wasn't built. We moved in. I took the unit brand new from the owner. And, I gave him my card. I had to give him my credentials. He's a very nice guy, but, he wanted to make sure I'd be a good tenant. And he said to me, he goes, Alex, it looks like you're in the real estate business. He goes, why don't you just buy my place? Why do you want to pay me $1,600 a month rent? And I said to him, okay. I said, how much do you want for it? And he goes, give me $420 and we can do the deal. No agents involved. And I said, look, I have to be realistic with you. I go, I know that you bought this place for $220. And I said, realistically, 2 years later, if you think it's worth $420, you could probably find a client but you didn't. That's why you're renting it to me. What I would pay for it is $230.
Yeah.
And I said, otherwise, why would I pay it? Because that's what it's. I said, how do you justify me paying $420,000 for 680 square feet when I bought 3,000 square feet custom home in Newmarket for $312,000? Like, how do you even bring those numbers into perspective?
Well, yeah.
And I said, this is a shoebox.
But
I mean, I couldn't live here long term.
But Alex, what were the comparables pulling up in the area? Were they 230, 240 like you were thinking?
No, they were 400,000. But in the building, when you went downstairs to the mailroom, you had 40 lock boxes any given week, and half the building is rented out.
Okay.
And that's all. And actually, I remember right before I met my wife. Well, when I had met my wife, when we were dating, my present wife, just down the street is King William Crescent. So one street over there was a bunch of townhomes. Before we bought that townhome in Maple, we rented a condo. It was on the first floor. I keep saying townhome, but it was a condo. But it was on the first floor, and I would climb over the balcony when I did grocery shopping. So it kind of felt like a townhome. And then in the hallway, the gym was right the next door beside me with the sauna. So it kind of gave me that townhome feeling. But I remember. Nicest guy in the world. His name was Freddie Mac, like the bank, and Fred Mac. I'd call him Freddie, but it was Fred Mac, and he was a 30-year-old Asian kid. I came to him with my ex-wife. It was like 3-4 days before Christmas, and he said, "Alex, I gave him my business card. I was working with real estate lawyers." He goes, "You seem like a nice guy. I trust you." He goes, "You know what? Don't rush. Bring me first and last months after New Year's." And I was like, wow, this is the nicest guy in the world. Like, nobody would ever give me the keys without taking at least first and last month's rent. He goes, "I trust you. You're not going to go anywhere. It's fine. I know you work at real estate lawyers. I looked you up on LinkedIn. It's cool." He goes, "You seem like an honorable guy. I'm not even concerned. Just take the keys." He goes, "I'm going away. I'll be back. Give it to me like the first week in January." And I just asked him, I said, "Do you mind me asking, what is it that you do for a living?" And the guy goes, "I'm an investor. I've got some of my parents' money." He goes, "I own 30 properties. Whoa. And I rent them out." Mm-hmm. And this guy's 30 years old, 30 properties. Mm-hmm. And I was renting that condo from him, so it was the same size, a little bit bigger. It was ground floor, is maybe like 700 square feet. It was the biggest one bedroom you can get in the building. And, that was like 5 years. We did the cycle of moving to the townhome, to the custom home, selling it, and then back to this condo. So call it 3 years went by, and I mean, I went from, $1,200 rent to $1,800 rent.
Whoa.
And it was literally, you could walk, it was like a 400-meter walk from building to building on Yonge Street, close to Highway 7, Richmond Hill. But the point is that, and I remember he offered me, he goes, "Why don't you buy this condo?" And I was like, "How much is it?" And he goes, "Give me $220. That's why I used that number, because I figured if I use the rate of inflation 3 years later and I'm not on the ground floor in a smaller unit on the 12th floor, mm-hmm. $230, that's what it's worth. That's really what it's worth. Now, how do you justify today those condos? I looked them up now. They're like $580, $575. Oh. I think $550 is the cheapest one. And let's say you put down the minimum 5% down. You're talking about a $2,500 only mortgage payment.
Dude,
come on.
Dude, if you put down 20% on that, you're still going to be paying $1,950.
Yep.
So
where are you going to get that 25% from? Where are you rolling in with $175K?
Yeah.
Cash. Where? I have to. Listen. Just Google the statistic. Mm-hmm. In North America, and we're talking about Canada, North America, including the United States. Mm-hmm. Okay, 50% of the population does not have $1,000 in savings in their account.
Well, Canada's $468 on average, and then the United States is $68, and then Australia is like $98.
Right. So if you factor in the statistics that are reported and not, let's say, the other, I don't even know what the percentage is. I've never Googled it, but the population.
Hello?
I mean, realistically, mm-hmm. if that's a signal of not just a real estate bubble.
We're losing you.
I don't know how these economists, and I, just like you, Mike, I mean, I'm nowhere near as well versed as you, but if you looked at my profile on LinkedIn, I worked at Questrade, which is Canada's largest discount brokerage. So I was invested into stocks at one point, especially in commodities. I wasn't much of a futures trader. I just, I like to deal in real time assets, but, I just don't know how these economists formulate the numbers that they formulate and how the news can portray and tell everybody that everything's fine. Because
I wanted
realistically,
yeah, go ahead. Finish what you were saying.
give me one family that's a family of two where, God forbid, something happens, whether they lose job or they get, or one of the partners gets ill. How long could they sustain what they're living on? I mean, most people that I know, they may have a couple of months. If they have more than that $468 in savings, they may have a couple of months that they can live on, and then what? I mean, I remember when my parents unfortunately divorced. My mom passed as well. My dad's an ultra successful businessman, but he's been remarried many times, many families, 8 marriages, so I don't really count anymore. But the point is when they were married, I remember that they would always have at least, like even when they got divorced, my dad left my mom with $175,000 in 1987.
Holy
that
crap!
Was a lot of money back then.
That's like
that
$1 million
bucks
today.
Yeah, and what my mom did is she immediately went. I mean, we never moved in, but she tried to invest in real estate. She didn't know a lot because that's what my dad started to do. And she went and she bought a house in North York for like $35,000. Mm-hmm. And for cash, and we still had like over $100,000. So I always remember my parents were savers. They always had money in their account. There was a time my mom was ill for some time, and then there was a time my dad was unemployed, but nothing had changed. We always lived in our apartment. We would still, go on our little vacations. My dad still had his cars. Like, I didn't notice that anything would change. But I don't know a lot of people today that could take that kind of a stress test.
No. No.
And I know myself that if operations were to shut down for, call it 6-7 months, I'd be wiped clean myself.
So Alex, you see, that one reason why I did leave the city was because of this. Is because of the stress people are under. You could see it, you could feel it. In Vancouver, it's a soulless place. During the week, during work hour week, is full of people, and then on the weekends is a ghost town because no one lives there because everyone commutes or takes the SkyTrain. And let me ask you this question, and something that you could probably answer a lot better. Why the hell is the media constantly massaging people and telling them that everything's okay?
Well, my wife's background's in medicine. She used to be a dentist. And I think that a better person to ask that question would definitely be like a psychologist and a psychiatrist. But if you're asking me, mm-hmm. and through my experience and my take on it, I think that generally speaking, as a society, as if we take the whole planet Earth, if we conceptualize the whole planet, I think in general people are good. Because if people were generally bad and problematic, we'd be at each other's throat. We'd be at World War III. We wouldn't coexist together. So taking that into perspective, that there's a general goodness in people, mm-hmm. that if you saw somebody drowning, you would reach out your hand, you wouldn't let them drown, if we can use that concept. I think that we don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I mean, I open up, like, every morning I get up and I first check my news feed. I like to know, like, there's that news, the top 5 stories you should know before you head out the door that day. I always like to follow that briefing, and I look at it, and there's so much tragedy. There's so much. Sometimes I want to hear about the cat that the firemen rescued from the tree, and that made headline news, as opposed to the bombing of the migrants in some subway station. I think generally speaking, we need to massage ourselves. We want to hear good things. If it's constantly bad news, I mean, we already have so much pressure on our heads. I think that they have to be more ethical about the way they do it. I think that where honesty is required, it deems to be there. And if I translate that into something simpler, I think that we need to be transparent where we need to be transparent, and we can sugarcoat things where they can. And a simple example was like me and Mike, here we go out to dinner. We've never met each other in person, but here I flew over, you came into Toronto, and we sit down at a restaurant, and you're like, hey, Alex, that's a really nice shirt you're wearing. And I'm like, yeah, Mike, this is a Versace. And you're like, oh, it's a Versace. And I'm like, yeah, do you like it? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, and then your next question is, well, do you mind me asking, if it's not a secret, what did you pay for? I'm like, well, this shirt was $800. Now, realistically, I bought it at Walmart. It's not a Versace, and it costs $20. But when you go home that day, what do you take home with yourself? Alex bought an $800 shirt. Does that story change Mike Martin's life? No. You might think I'm arrogant. You might think it's nice that I could afford the shirt. You might want one. But ultimately, you're going to go home and it's not going to change your life.
Exactly.
But if we sit down at that same restaurant and you say to me, hey, Alex, did you get my test results? And I'm like, yeah, you have cancer. You're going to die in a week. I think you're going to take home something different than my $800 shirt. Right. So I think where we need to be transparent is the things that really matter, the things that really affect our lives. I think that the media has a responsibility to us, and that could be an entirely different subject and topic. Mm-hmm. And I think that obviously, governments, government policy, a lot of things out there are not transparent. I think we all know that. I think that, Mike Martins, Alex Dolgonos, I think every day we can do our part to make this world a better place. When I meet with my clients, look, I want to make money. I mean, go look at my website. I've got 3 properties listed there. Mm-hmm. One is 1.6 million, one is 2.92, and one is 1.9 million. Now, I want to sell those because I've negotiated a seller's fee with my client, and there is somebody that's going to buy it. But if that same person that I'm selling it to and came up to me and said, hey, Alex, this property, fine, you took off a couple of $100,000. It's a good deal. But I'm really stretching myself. I mean, I had to borrow money from my parents, or I had to, leverage my whatever. Do you think it's the right thing to do? I would say absolutely not. Don't buy this house.
Yeah.
But if another person came to me and I said to him, what do you do for a living? And he said, well, I'm an investor, or I own a business, or I just want to live in this house. Because they're all custom built properties. I want to live at this property. It's near the lake, and I have 100 people that work in my factory, and I know. What do you think about the market? And I said, well, you know what? If you wait a year, the house might drop another $200,000-$300,000. But is that ultimately going to change your life? And the guy's like, no, because I just want to move in, Alex. I don't care. I mean, I flip my Mercedes every 2 years. I lose $100,000 on my car every 2 years. That kind of a person, I'm going to say to them, listen, if you can afford it and it makes you happy, I mean, is a Rolex worth its weight in gold? No. I could go buy the gold that the Rolex is made out of for $10,000, but why should I pay $100,000 for a watch that doesn't keep the time?
That's
because
right.
I just want it, because I want to wear it. So it just depends, right? And that's what I'm saying. Transparency is needed when it's needed, and it should be there. And I think that we all have the social responsibility. So yes, I want to sell those houses, but I want to sell them to the right client. I'm not going to lie to my client. If they ask me, do you think this house is overpriced? Well, I even wrote there that my seller is very motivated because they know they're overpriced and they need to exit. Mm-hmm. So they're going to exit at a loss, but they can only afford to lose so much, because another secret is all those properties each have 2 mortgages on them. Ooh. And they're all being called at the end of the year. So that gives you, and that's a builder. Okay. So I'm just trying to tell you that gives you a little bit of insight of how the market is and what I'm seeing. I'm talking about people with money. I've got a client, my wife's got an art gallery in, if you guys Google, Improve Canada, which is Canada's largest home improvement mall. And I've got a client there, and she owns 12 properties. She's got a factory overseas. She's got a showroom there. She owns a couple of units, but she's got 12 properties. She's had them all for sale for a year, and she can't move any of them. Mm-hmm. She introduced me to this client that gave me these properties. She said, Alex, show me that you can sell one of these properties faster than the realtor, and you can sell all my 12, because I need to exit. Because I've never had a mortgage, and now I've taken out mortgages because I need the money to come in. And I said to her, what I can do that a realtor can't do, because I'm not governed under the same rules, I'm going to advertise your property in Russia, Australia, China, Vancouver, United States. I'm going to try to pull a client from anywhere that I can. I can't guarantee, but I know that I can do more than a realtor. Mm-hmm. And for that's why we have our service. And I've got connections with lawyers that are in these other geographical vicinities as well that I can correlate business with. So I have capabilities, and I'm not bragging. I mean, look, there are some good realtors out there. Not to say there's some successful realtors, but for the most part, they put a picture of your property on the MLS, and then they just wait for another realtor to come and buy it. And that's not working anymore with these properties that are over $2 million in these custom-built properties. Those days have come to an end. So, I hopefully that answers the question. I mean, why does the government massage things? Why do they massage anything else? And if you walk into your doctor's office and your doctor diagnosed you and he knows you've got cancer, he's going to say to you, let's run those tests a second time. Let me send you to an internal medicine specialist. Mm-hmm. Because nobody really wants to hear bad news. I think our nature is commonly good. I think we all want to do the right thing. And I hope that we all want to do the right thing, and I hope we all strive to do the right thing. So I don't necessarily say that massaging things is a bad thing, but I do say that certain areas and a certain degree of, if we call it massaging, I think that it's over-exaggerated, and I think it'll have an ill negative effect at the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, that was a very good response, but very good answer to the question I asked you. That got me thinking of other things, other things that are happening and stuff that happened, and just reminiscing on other articles that I read and what's happening around the world. You know what? I think it boils down in the end that people need to start doing their own research. I think people need to start, like you said. Can you explain to me before we went on how people don't need a real estate agent or anymore? How did you phrase that? That it's not necessary to spend X amount on a real estate. You remember you were.
So I think we can touch back on your very last question about this moral responsibility. So if I can just take a little bit of a side of a personal note here, is my wife and I I don't want to use the word religious because I've got friends of all sorts of religions. Let's just say that we're very strong in our faith. We're very spiritual. We believe very strongly in a God. And I truly believe that God oversees everything that we do. And there's nothing at the end of this life that you're ever going to get away with, because ultimately he sees and knows everything about us and will judge us at the end. Mm-hmm. If we put that to the side, I think that we all are here, like I was just saying earlier, we have some sort of moral obligation, not just to God, but to others, to everybody, to people, to the general population. And we want to try to make it a little bit better. So here's my example. When I bought my first place, my first townhouse, when I sidetracked there and I forgot what my point was. I'll never forget the real estate agent's name. His name was Jude Ross. He was, and I'm going to use the word, he was a black man. He was black, okay? And I think he was of Jamaican descent. Mm-hmm. And he was typical stereotype black person in those days. He came in a white Cadillac with red leather. He had a lot of gold on him, and always a humongous smile, all teeth. And he's like, Alex, thanks for calling me. I'm going to help you find a place. Now, back then, when I was 18 years old, they didn't have a thing called GPS. In fact, they had a Pearlie's book, which I still couldn't coordinate with. When my dad would drive with me on the car in the 401 east, west, 400 north, south, I would say to my dad, Dad, there's all these loops and all these circles. How do you know where you were going? And he would say to me, well, the lake is south, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and that's how and I had no clue. And I remember even being in, when I got my driver's license at 16, I would have to stop at gas stations all the time for directions, even to get to the beach, because even if somebody said, just go north on this street, I was like,
hello? Alex? Connection lost. Let's see if we could call him back here. Let's see if we could call him back here. Hope he didn't lose internet signal on his side. He was bringing up, I got questions. Guys, if you want to ask Alex any questions, please put them in. I have one here from I'm a Patriot. Mike, ask him how much real equity he thinks the people have. Ooh, a lot of people cashed out their equity a long time ago, buddy. Long time ago. It says Alex is unavailable. I hope he's okay. I hope he's okay. I hope he's okay. Let's try this again. Connection is lost. I lost him, guys. I don't know how I lost him. I lost him. Let's try this again. Did I lose internet? No, I'm live streaming still. Everything looks like it's kosher here. Damn, I lost the call. My Wi-Fi is down for some weird reason. I got no more Wi-Fi here. Guys, you have internet where you're at? Let me know in the comments. Oh, here we go. Hello, Alex. You still there?
Yeah, we must have got disconnected.
Yeah, I think I lost my Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi went down. I got a question here from I Am a Patriot.
Yes.
Mike, ask him how much real equity he thinks people have.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, when we talk about how much equity real people, are we referring to the middle class? If we're referring to the middle class, I think realistically very little equity. I think that the middle class is striving just to make ends meet. If we're talking about a generation before mine, like my parents, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I think Canada is one of the countries in the world that has the highest number of property ownership, meaning that whether there's a mortgage or not, but the properties here, we've got the highest number of owned properties. So I think a generation behind us, like my parents, I think those people have some sustainable or real equity, meaning that they've got some savings, they've got some, savings in different formats like RSPs, some stock equity, they own their vehicles. But I think in general, I think people have very little equity. And again, I mean, my wife is in her mid-30s. I'm in my early 40s. I don't have any equity. Realistically, I mean, I don't have any hard equity besides our home. And again, if the market drops, if I had to exit, I would be at a loss myself. Okay. Realistically, again, I don't think people have as much equity as they appear to have, if that's politically correct.
I got a question here from Jeff O'Toole. Mike, ask him how much influence does he think foreign buyers have made in Richmond Hill and Markham?
I think they made the majority of the influence. I think especially with somebody's mentioning Markham and Richmond Hill, I think the very reason that the prices are the way they are is, I would say 95% is foreign investment. And I say that wholeheartedly because I have been a majority of concentrate. In fact, Real Estate Lawyer's office originally was in Markham, had moved to City View Drive, which would be Vaughan, but a majority of our work has always to this day been in Markham, Richmond Hill, Aurora. And a majority of the property owners, I'm not talking about necessarily the people that are in the homes that are either renting them, but a majority of the owners are Asian, and it is foreign investment. There's a ton of Asian real estate agents and a ton of now new brokerages. One is that I see everywhere is Superstars Realty. I mean, they came out of nowhere. I think they're well over 50, 60 agents if you look on their website, and definitely much more of an influence than what the media reported as being 5%. It's so far off. It's very high. It's close to 100%.
Okay. Somebody's asking, saying, I Am a Patriot's asking, do you see that in detached homes the way you do in condos? Drive down the street at dinner time and no one's there?
That's a funny question. The reason I'm laughing is because it's it's just past 12 a.m. here. Even if we go back when we started on our phone call, if I look out the window, and I'm in Aurora, you probably have. And I'm talking like from what I can see, which is a couple of streets. I'm a corner unit. But let's just say out of 100 homes in my view, you have maybe 5 homes that have 1 or 2 lights on and cars in the driveway. All of these properties are investment properties that are just sitting empty. And you see that when I was talking about the condo, the one from Fred Mack and the one that I lived in after, which was just last year, a lot of those units, yes, they're foreign investment held. They're empty, or their kids come stay there for a while, or when they're traveling, whatever it may be. But yes, absolutely. So I think that you see, again, like if you're talking about investment that's high equity but unoccupied properties, if you're talking about the general population, again, you're back to people middle class surviving day to day. So I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully it does.
I remember I took a couple of strolls and did some selfie videos there in Vancouver on 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th Avenue there.
Remember you were doing that.
Yeah. And there was just nobody out. Long weekend, Saturday, sunny,
Yeah.
4 p.m. in the afternoon. Not a single person barbecue, not a child on the street. Christmas decorations on windows in the middle of summer. It's crazy. It is crazy what is happening here in Vancouver. It's just phenomenal. Okay, now somebody from Japan, Banku, asks, "What is your favorite color?"
I don't know how much that matters, but I'd have to say blue.
Okay. Because mine is green. I want to ask you. I want to bring it. I want to bring in this one here. I got an article I want to bring in, and I bring this up more when I'm referencing the exodus of Vancouver, because Douglas Todd. The Douglas Todd is a very famous article that's now circulating around everywhere, where the amount of people, whites and Aboriginals, have left the city of Vancouver into the interior of Vancouver, and they've, I guess, messed around with the prices in the interior, and now it's becoming unaffordable in the interior now. And I know that's happened when a lot of people left the GTA and went to Hamilton, Cambridge, Waterloo.
Yep.
That started bringing up prices there, and then affordability started to make... just started shaking things up. Now, I got this article that I bring up from time to time. It's from August 18, 2016, and it's a scary one. It's a very scary one. And it says, Canada wants more Chinese workers, students, and tourists, says immigration minister. So Canada is looking for lucrative business people to come in. And you see a picture here with Trudeau and the president of China, or should I say the emperor of China, and Canada's bidding or working to attract 500,000 people per year by opening more visa offices in China, and to help Canada compete for Chinese workers, students, and lucrative tourist business. Now, Alex, we're sold out, buddy? What's happening? Why are we selling out? If your dad was to come from Russia today with the backpack on his backpack over his shoulder, there's no way he could make it. I'm not saying he's not ambitious and stuff, but I'm saying, how could the general immigrant that comes from Portugal or Spain or France come with a backpack on their shoulder and pay their house off in 5 years like they did? What's happening, Alex?
I think the best analogy that I've heard said to me many years ago that I always remember now, and I have a different take on it, but they always say that money doesn't smell. And I think the governments and the general political state of that is that we're going to let any money in. We don't care if it's legitimate money. We don't care if it was, illegal money. As long as the person bringing it in has a clean track record, then we don't care how he made. We don't care if it's blood money. Bottom line is. Now, to mention when we came in, and again, I'm not trying to sound biased by any means, but when we came to Canada, there were very little social assistance programs available. I mean, My parents had to work very, very hard, and the process was difficult. We lived in Italy for a year. We lived in Vienna for a couple of months. It's very hard to get into Canada. It wasn't as easy as it is today, and obviously we didn't have all the resources. You can Google anything. You can file your application electronically. But I think that what Canada is trying to do is, just as they're oblivious to our banking system, where they say it's nothing like what happened in 2007-8 in the United States. I think that we're closing our eyes to a lot of the money that's coming in, and let's be realistic. I mean, how much of the money that's poured into Canada is legitimate money from hardworking families or professional career people? I mean, it's probably very little. And and it's not just in Vancouver. I mean, when I go in my neighborhood and I see 20-year-old kids driving Lamborghinis and Aston Martins and McLarens, okay, and Bentleys, I would, even if I had that kind of money, I'd want to teach my son some responsibility before I gave him a car like that. I'd definitely make him work very, very hard and earn it, and then when he's 40 years old, say, now you can go yourself a Bentley and a Lamborghini. So my point is that obviously there's been an extreme flow of a lot of money. We know that a lot of the money is also legitimate because China itself tried to stop the outpour of money. There's been tons of reports in the news, but I think Canada is turning a blind eye to it because, again, as long as those wheels keep getting greased and they keep turning and all the development, like we're trying to obviously outgrow our infrastructure. We want to build this new waterfront. We want these new subway lines. We want to be the Dubai of the North America. Okay, we want to be greater than New York City and greater than Los Angeles. And we don't realize that all that concrete is going to come collapsing down under its own weight. It's just too much concrete, too concentrated in one area, like that analogy of too many people standing on a sheet of ice. And I think that that's the problem. I think that government policies are turning. I think greed supersedes everything right now. I think that's an issue that we have. I think we live in a very materialistic world. We're a very materialistic society. I think people are, I don't need to say this, but, what's it called? What's the word that I'm looking for when you're, talk too much today, but, when you're taking 500 selfies of yourself on Facebook. Mike, help me out.
When you're taking your
Not... What's the word that I'm looking for? when you're self-indulgent, when it's all about me.
Oh, self-centered?
Narcissism is running high.
Yeah.
Narcissism is running high. All I'm seeing is selfies and, look at me. And everybody we all agree that 90% of the things that people post on social media, they wish that they're as happy as they look in their photos. We all know that it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
People taking pictures in front of cars that they don't own.
Oh, I love that.
So narcissism is a problem, and I think all of this feeds into our psyche. One thing that disappoints me, tremendously, is how sex itself is the last frontier. You're talking. Just turn on, Facebook, and being in the legal business, and obviously, involved in criminal law as well. The kind of files that I see through some of our associate law firms and my associate lawyers that I work for, the kind of things that I'm seeing, the exploitation that I'm seeing of very young people. I'm not talking about under the age of 18, but I'm just saying that happens as well. But I'm just saying in general, sex is being exploited everywhere. It's almost as if the last frontier. If I'm a real estate agent that doesn't have 600 tons of makeup, 500 colors of highlight in my hair, overinflated lips, and boobs, then I'm not going to be able to sell my real estate, because that's the only thing that's the only thing I've got left to sell my real estate with.
Yeah.
Is my fancy car and my Rolex watch and my typical Barbie doll standing beside me, and that's being applied everywhere. And I think that image that they would say that don't poison our children with, well, we're poisoning ourselves as adults with this very same image.
Exactly.
So I think that, again, we can get off the topic of real estate and get into, much more deep-rooted problems. But I think society needs to feed itself with not just real estate, but we're let's agree, we're the highest consumers in North America. Okay, here's a perfect question. That's a good point. I was in Canadian Tire this morning, and I was walking with my wife, and I told Mike this off the side note, how I spent $70 on some cat litter, and I don't remember, toilet papers, some necessities in the home, let's call them. And and I'm walking down the aisle, okay, at Canadian Tire. Let's not even go to Walmart, because that's going to be tomorrow. But and then somebody, and I had saw a conversation at the side, that there's some people, some Asian people, and they're picking up those $800 Dyson vacuums, and they're like, they have all this money. And I'm just saying to my wife, well, of course they have all this money, because everything you're buying in this freaking store is made in China. Mm-hmm. You walk into Walmart, it's not Walmart, it's not an American company, it's a Chinese company. Mm-hmm. We can, when you ask where these foreign investors have all the money, they have all your money. You've been working and giving it to them because you love to consume. Everything in my house is made in China, including my furniture, my marble table, my TV. Everything's made in China today. I don't think there's anything in my house that's actually made in Canada or made in North America. Maybe the bolts that are made by Nebrasco. Some Hamilton Steel Company, but I think that's a problem. And this whole cycle, this whole thing feeds into our psyches that we're consumers and we need and we want, and it's just it's a vicious cycle, and we're in that cycle. And what you did, Mike, was you got out.
Yes.
You realized that you don't want to be in this cycle because there's no happiness. There's no happiness when you're running in the hamster wheel, right? You just eventually drop. You got to get out of the hamster.
Alex, I just couldn't raise my kids there.
You did the right thing.
I can't raise my kids there. I'm sorry. I just couldn't do it. I wanted to ask you... want to ask you one more. I know it's getting really late where you are. I know it's very late where you are. What was I going to ask you? I was on the tip of my tongue, and it was kind of funny, too. I was going to ask you something humorous, but I guess I forgot. But, hey, you're willing to come on the show once in a while?
Absolutely. How many viewers do we have tonight?
We got up to like 93. It dropped down, but it doesn't really matter because it's the replayability of the show goes up to the thousands.
Well, I want to thank everybody that's been listening to us.
Yeah, the comments are going good. The comments are going great, and we could do if you want to go off topic real estate. I would love to do pick your brain about some of the. We could do a Mike in the Night show this Saturday. I got Wabtech. You better tune into Wabtech. This guy's phenomenal. This guy's like an IT I don't know. He's just I don't know. One of the he'll be on the show this Saturday, but I want to have you on the show on Mike in the Night. Maybe we could discuss more psychological things that have changed in the last 10 years alone. How people's psyches have evolved, how we've become a consuming culture, how consuming has taken over our lives, how people can't get off the damn electronics and can't get off the damn phones, how people, how remember back in the day, Alex, when you needed a phone call or waited for a phone call, you have to wait at home by your phone?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that.
I know, man. My battery is going to die in like 2 minutes. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to, it's going to be the end of the world if I can't get the plug, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to live without my phone for the next hour. I hear you. Yeah, we should connect. We should connect on a different topic. And then we should obviously reconnect and see how, our thoughts on real estate, how our predictions pan out. I think a good time to touch base will be, like I said, I think there's going to be an uptick in September, October, November. And I think if we were to look at those months and then look after January, so if we look into February, I think we're going to see the down.
Q1 January, we got to look at that. I'll have you on the show I'll have you on the show whenever you want. So we could do this a regular thing so people know that you could come on and we could talk. But the replayability of the show is phenomenal. We don't get a lot of guests live because the majority live in all these time zones. So there's a lot happening. So a lot of people watch me in Australia. A lot of people watch me in New Zealand. A lot of people. I'm almost at 2 million views, eh?
Wow!
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, my channel.
Well, let's keep our information. If anybody needs anything off the record, they can hit my website. My email's there. If they need any legal advice, that's available. If they need any closing services, if they're in the Ontario region, so keep us in mind for that. And let's connect on a different day.
Yep, yeah, that's what we could do. We have to stay in. And if you ever come to the BC, please come out and visit me for a couple of days here.
Absolutely, Mike.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
No,
I appreciate it. Thank you to the viewers.
Oh, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything. Thank you for your input. It means a lot to us. And yeah, we'll keep in touch for sure. Okay?
All right, Mike. Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night. Oh, we got music playing from his website here. So don't forget to check him out, iAgent Pro. Alex is a very straight up guy. I've known him for quite a while through social media. And he wanted to call into the show and join in, guys. So, guys, if you want to join into the show, add me on with the Skype. Add me on Skype. It's Mike Martins 1980. Mike Martins, MikeMartins 1980. Add me on Skype, guys, if you want to talk and you want to be on the show. I want to see if I could get us maybe set the system up to do three-way calling and get several people on the show. Rainer Mola, yeah, sent you my number via email a week back. That's right. Are you in Montreal or Quebec? I think I remember you. That's right. If you want to add me to Skype or get Skype for your phone, I got Skype in like 10 minutes and I had it working. Get Skype for your phone. It's really clear. It sounds good. And we don't have to use phone lines. And that's right, Montreal. Yeah. Rainier, add me. It's Mike Martins 1980 at Gmail. Just add me. Just tell me who you are. I'll accept you. We'll go ahead and then we'll have you on the show this Wednesday if you'd like for trends in the housing market, because I know things are heating up right now in Montreal. There are bidding wars right now in Montreal. A lot of people have pooped the scoop in Toronto and the GTA, and a lot of people are moving to Montreal. So a lot of people moving out to PEI. Remember the article I read a week and a half ago? A lot of people moving to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Remember? Moving to greener pastures, if you want to call that. Anyways, guys, 99? No, it's Mike Martin's 1980. It's Mike Martin's 1980 is my my Skype if you guys want to join me, guys, for this Wednesday, guys. Don't forget, I'm going to push for 6:30 p.m. Western Seaboard time, LA County time. LA County time, guys, don't forget, 6:30 p.m. Western Seaboard time. I'll be here with Trends in the Housing Market, going over a few articles and what's happening in Australia, what's happening in New Zealand, UK, Canada, and the United States of America. I want to keep my pulse on what's happening in Portland, Oregon. It's very important because Portland, Oregon's bottoming out right now at $401,000. People with the average income of $81,000 can't afford to service a $401,000 mortgage right now. So they're bottoming out right now. And someone just sent me a message from Japan. Good. Anyways, I'm going to thank everybody for being on the show. Thank you so much, people. It means a lot to me that you guys are here for me and to hear out some of the guests that I get on. I know I'm not the most educated person on the planet. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed, and I could barely read. But I want to get my message out there, and I want to thank everyone for being there for me. Don't forget to add me on Skype, and don't forget to... And thanks for the tips. I've been getting tips almost every day from people all over the world, sending me tips in my tip jar there on PayPal. Thank you so much. God bless. Big hug. Thank you, and have yourself a good night.